overachiever whose parents always sprung for the top-of-the-line supplies. Another was a star art student. We also had the guy who always got 100% on every essay test without studying. The dude seemed destined to be a trial lawyer or successful journalist. And personally, I was semi-decent at remembering facts and analyzing details. I knew right away that we were going to ace this thing. The rich girl offered up her home, her poster board, her snacks. The artists showed up with their fancy, expensive art markers. The two girls were already close friends, and they had planned out the whole thing when I arrived on the Saturday afternoon that we'd set aside to do the project. I offered some suggestions, but honestly, mostly I just watched them do their thing. Our smart, smooth-talking compatriot had a soccer game and only showed up for the last 20 minutes of the project. But it didn't really matter. The poster was incredible, creative, funny, informative, clear. Along with the poster, we had to turn in an evaluation of the other students in our group. Of course, I rated the two friends an A+, but I wasn't sure what to say about the guy who didn't do one single thing. And I was a little nervous about my own grade, too, because I didn't really do anything either except for show up and cheerlead. In the end, we all got A's. Even me, even Mr. Better Late Than Never. Did I try to change that fact? No. But I did feel a little weird about it. Sorry. We are born with a sense of fairness. Babies, as young as my little Eddie here, 9 or 10 months old, get mad if they see their caregivers offer other babies more treats than they themselves are offered. The story in the gospel today tugs on that ethic of fairness. It just seems unfair that someone who does less work should get the same pay as someone who does more and more difficult work. The early workers in the vineyard seemed justified in their questioning, and the vineyard owner, well, the vineyard owner seems like a little bit of a jerk. Some modern interpreters have gone so far to say that Jesus didn't tell this parable as an allegory. We understand most of the parables are allegories, right? But in this parable, it's traditionally understood that God is meant to be the vineyard owner and that the workers are meant to be followers of Jesus seeking salvation, not pay. No matter when you seek salvation, you get it. But some interpreters say that Jesus would never have compared God to the kind of unjust, wealthy landowners that the poor workers of Israel would have known and been at the mercy of. These men were the oppressors of the people that Jesus came to free and uplift, and some interpreters say that no parallel should be drawn between them and God. These interpreters suggest that this was less of a parable and more of an expose. It was a rallying cry. See what these wealthy oppressors are doing to you? These men are taking advantage of your hard work. An alternate title to the story they suggest might be The Union-Busting Employer, How to Set Workers Against One Another. Now, such a reading is bolstered by the fact that Jesus had just had an encounter with a very rich man. In the passage in Matthew preceding this one, a young man who is wealthy tells Jesus that he wishes to enter the kingdom of heaven. Jesus tells him he must follow the law and the commandments, which the young rich man swears that he has done. Then Jesus says to the young man, if you wish to be perfect, go, sell all your possessions and give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me. When the young man heard this word, he went away grieving, for he had many possessions. Throughout the course of the Gospels, Jesus doesn't have much good to say about those who hold on to their wealth in this world. That is clear. While employers like Amazon spend millions of dollars every year on union busting, and Jesus who healed the sick, fed the hungry, and instructed his followers to give up their wealth for the poor, Jesus would certainly have been on the side of workers and worker-employer conflict. We can still imagine that would be true today. It is still unlikely that such an expose was Jesus' original intention in telling this story. The earliest audience of this parable would have associated the image of the householder with the God of Israel. Several popular portions of the Psalms and prophets refer to God as the owner of a vineyard, and to Israel as God's vineyard. God would likely have come to mind right away when Jesus' audience heard tell of a man who owned a vineyard. In fact, as I said, for centuries and even today, most interpreters of this parable take it to the level of full allegory. God is the owner of the vineyard is the kingdom of heaven. A day's wage is salvation. We receive salvation whether we follow God into the kingdom of heaven early in our lives or at the very last hour. I was in a Bible study this week where the group took a look at this passage, and one group member laid out this allegory in full. Another group member's shoulders sagged in relief. I like that, she said. I can handle that. Salvation for everyone regardless. That doesn't feel that unfair to me. Now, if this story were actually about money, she said, I could not get behind it. And I imagine that she is not the only person who feels that way. Economic negotiations are part of our daily lives. We've already established that Jesus cared about the material reality of his followers, healing them, feeding them, telling them what to do with their money. Given its position directly following Jesus' command to dispose of one's wealth to help the poor, it doesn't seem that unlikely that Jesus would have wanted us to consider the economic implications of this story as well. That's one of the gifts of Jesus' parables. Why he didn't just teach lessons, he told stories. The stories allow for multiple interpretations and applications, likely deliberately so. If we can accept that Jesus would have wanted all those who followed him, regardless of how long they followed or how difficult that following had been, and he wanted all his followers to enter the kingdom of heaven, can we also open ourselves up to the possibility that Jesus would want all workers, regardless of what they do or how hard or how long they work, that he would want all workers to have a daily wage, that their economic well-being would be more important to God than fairness? Can we open ourselves up to this possibility? If it is difficult for you, like it is difficult for my friend, we're not alone. We're in it together trying to figure this out. For years, the women's movement has had the mantra, right? Equal pay for equal work. And a study as recently as in 2022 revealed that women still make 82 cents on every dollar that men make doing the exact same work. In addition, traditional women's work is less lucrative than traditional men's work, even at the entry level. Many of us are concerned about fairness because certain groups have been left behind with unfair pay that's not actually enough to survive on. We all need resources to survive, and we all need money to secure these resources. And because of unfair labor practices, many people have struggled unnecessarily, unfairly. There's a reason this passage rubs us wrong. There's other reasons too. A candidate in the recent Democratic primary popularized the idea of the universal basic income, where our tax dollars would fund a check sent to every American household so that they would have enough money to pay for some basic needs. A relative of mine, progressive enough to be planning on voting in said Democratic primary, told me that he would, under no circumstances, be voting for the candidate supporting this universal basic income. He said, I have a friend who's campaigning for this guy, and he flat out told me that he can't wait to quit his job so that he can smoke weed and play video games all day. There is no way I want my tax dollars to support that kind of lifestyle. We're worried about fairness, about paying people what they deserve, because we don't want to be taken advantage of. We don't want to be the ones doing the whole group project. We can't do the whole group project. We need each other to do it. There is still more to our obsession with fairness. A few years back, a church I served decided to raise the wages of all its workers to a minimum of $15 an hour. The last to receive this raise were the Sunday morning child care workers. The board was in unanimous agreement that this should be so. After the meeting, the board chair, who championed the effort, approached me. She said, I do have one concern though. She said, now we have to look at the administrator's salary. I said, well, she's making over $15 an hour. The board chair said, yes, but it's pretty insulting that we pay her nearly the same as we pay the child care worker. If she finds out, we might lose her. We're also worried about fairness because we've been told that our wages and salaries are value judgments, that they show us where we rank in society's standings. We care about fairness because we want to have enough. We need food, shelter, health care to survive, and we need to get paid and paid enough, and we have seen economic injustice and don't want that to happen to us. We also don't want to get stuck doing all the work. We need other people's labor to make society function. We are dependent on each other. That's uncomfortable. That's vulnerable. So we want to know where we stand, how precarious our dependency is. We want some security that we're not at the bottom of the food chain. And into the midst of that reality, Jesus speaks this radical message. He says, in the kingdom of heaven, there is no food chain. In the kingdom of heaven, everyone gets enough. My friend from Bible study, who admitted her reluctance to wrap her head around this economic message, she also said, I don't know why it upsets me so much because I have no problem with potlucks. I didn't understand her point, so she explained. I'm a terrible cook, she said, and I don't have oodles of cash to pay for a caterer, so I'm always the person who brings a bag of chips or a stack of napkins. But do you know what? I never feel guilty for enjoying the hours of labor that you put into your delicious dessert or Ashley put into our veggie pizzas. That's kind of the point of a potluck. Everybody gets to load up their plate, no matter what. No matter what. Our concern with fairness points to something real. We all need enough resources to survive, and procuring those resources, it takes work, human labor. More labor than we can do by ourselves. The long and short of it is that we need each other to survive. Life, whether we like it or not, is a group project. And we're not always going to be the one at the top of the class with the most to contribute. We're not always the best cook at the potluck. So this parable is a promise. It is a promise that God's generosity extends to everyone who shows up at the doors to the kingdom. No matter what, the food at God's table is for everyone. No matter what, we will always be welcome and we will always be cared for by God, ourselves, our homes, our tables, are we willing to be equally welcoming? Are we willing to be equally generous?